Andrew, you're live on Truth Wanted. What's up?
What up, gentlemen? I do want to give one plus for that last caller. He is calling in on your turf. You guys have home field advantage. That's the only good thing I want to say about that interaction.
I guess.
Yeah,
sure thing, Andrew. Well,
right.
John has called. It might as well be. I mean, John's called in so much. It almost doesn't feel like he has any disadvantage anymore for that. But I mean, if we want to frame it that way, sure. Yeah, I'll give you that, Andrew. Go ahead.
All right. You guys have helped me out a lot. I don't really see good evidence for the God of the Bible. And you guys have helped me get to that point from a fundamentalist Christian. But
very cool.
What I wanted to say is that absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. So
it is sometimes, right?
Justification. Right.
It is sometimes, right, though, Andrew?
My question to finish it. Yeah. But my question to finish it, or you want to? Yeah. My question is, what is your evidence for evidentialism? That we should only believe something for evidence. Where's the evidence for that?
Yeah. So
I don't know that that's the stance that I would take so hardcore. But I mean, go ahead, Dan. Yeah.
Well, this is okay. So this is where you get into the realm of postmodern philosophy, right? So I was reading Deleuze recently, which, by the way, Deleuze is a clusterfuck. Most postmodern philosophy is a clusterfuck. There's a reason why it has the reputation that it is. But Deleuze is very interested in this idea that we have about the sciences. And he's kind of parsing out, we have these institutions that ideally give us these objective facts, but that constantly is in flux. Like there are many examples in medicine, for example, of somebody studying one thing and saying it does one thing, and then somebody else studying the same thing and saying it's doing actually something else in different populations, right? So we try very, very hard to do this thing called science, but like it doesn't always give us this idea of truth. But it's all based on this system of evidence, right? Like evidence in the scientific sense can be a number of different things. It can be polling people. It could be getting blood tests. It can be, all kinds of stuff. Because overall, it seems to be the only way of getting knowledge that we have that seems to be relevant for making public policy. Okay. So if you have some other kind of evidence that justifies for yourself that God is real, I can't actually really dispute that. That might sound like a hot take coming from an atheist, but really I can't. If you're using a different system, I can't engage with the system that it is. But I'm interested in systems that can produce reliable results, right?
There we go.
Stuff that we can have predictions with, expectations with. And pretty much one of the only ways to do that is through the methods of science, right? So that's why we hold this standard about evidence, because God, if he exists, at least the Christian God, definitely interacts with the physical world in some way, right? If you believe the Bible in any case, which I know you're deconstructing some of that, but if you take any of the stories in any literal capacity, God is physically interacting with the world. He's not just like he made it and then he leaves it alone. If you believe in Jesus in particular, and Jesus as God, definitely interacting with the world. Therefore, there has to be some sort of effect in the world that we can examine from that, whether it's historical methods that can examine, Jesus's life and, the people around him. Miracles are another way. People talk about miracles all the time happening, or just God, I don't know, talking to people, I guess. Hasn't talked to me, hasn't talked to anybody on camera or microphones. So I call that into question, right? So in order for us to have a public access to each other in conversation, we have to use something that's more than just personal experience, more than just, these other kinds of methods. And we use evidence to kind of have that discourse. So anyway, that's my long sort of way to get around to answering that. Hopefully that
I think you said it really well, because when you said it seems to be, essentially the best method we have when it comes to making public policy and making progress on this stuff. I agree. It's not to say that it's the only way to get to beliefs. Of course not. But it seems to be the one that is, just like Dan said, most reliable with coming up with answers. And that's That's good. That's a good thing. It's not
Yeah.
perfect, but it's a hell of a lot better than closing our eyes, spinning around, and pointing at the first thing we see, right?
Exactly.
I
Andrew,
think it's the
what do you
best
think?
reliable method. Yeah. I think it's the best reliable method for certain things, even
Okay, what
falsifying a lot of things. And but
wouldn't be?
I was I,
Well, I'll let you finish. Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, I'm
Let's
sorry.
finish
I'm
first.
sorry. I got excited.
I was taking this new like viewpoint that I've learned from you guys and applying it to all of my former Christian beliefs. And there's this one issue that I'm getting stumped on that science cannot give me. And I think this is where science is limited, and you have to have probably faith or something other than science. And it's this. Would you guys this is a terrible example, and I'm sorry, but I'm trying to be honest here. Would you guys outlaw incest in every single case, even if it doesn't harm people? And so if it doesn't harm people, if all you have is science, then you can't really outlaw incest. You could say, well, it doesn't hurt anybody, so science can't tell you that it's immoral.
Let's take a pause for a second.
Yeah.
Because science does not answer questions of morality.
Thank you.
Right? That is philosophy, right? That is above the realm of science. Science does work on principles set out by philosophy. In some ways, philosophy is one of the most important of human interests because it lays the groundwork for all other sciences to be legitimate. If we don't have a great understanding of philosophy, then we can't even start with science. But science doesn't tell us what's right or wrong, right? That comes down to ethics, particularly for some human cultures, morality. Morality, when I say that, usually involving, deities sometimes, religious systems, culture, right? Ethics is what we usually refer to it in the more secular sense. So secularists like myself and Elliot would maybe have a different answer to that question that you might expect, which is, if we're basing our principles of setting public policy on harm, right, which is like more of a consequentialist point of view rather than a utilitarian or other kind of point of view, then there is a case to be made that incest and incestuous relationships could be legal and don't have to be illegal. Now, there's some people that say that's dangerous because there can be consequences that come with that, right? The results of incestuous relationships, having children. A lot of people are concerned about these sorts of things. But aside from that entire debate, we can't answer all questions about morality just because we're atheists now, right? We didn't get special knowledge to figure out what's right or wrong or what's the best thing for all human beings just because we figured out God's not real, right? So like part of the journey is kind of figuring that out. It's kind of, basing that out. Because here's the truth, Andrew. You're never going to get good answers to Christianity either. Christians argue about this stuff just as much as atheists do, if not more so, about the right or wrong, because there has never been a consistent idea of right or wrong within Christianity either. That has also changed throughout time and has never been solid. Even in its beginnings, you can see this in the New Testament, where Paul and Peter are already arguing about whether or not circumcision should be a thing within early Christian communities, right? Like there's already these debates. So I'm getting long-winded here, but the point is, I don't think this should be a stumbling block for you in your deconstruction, because we all have to consider what's right and what's wrong and what's ethical and what's not ethical. But that really, honestly, truly doesn't have a whole lot to do with the God question or whether Christianity itself is real or legitimate.
And just real quick, because this is a really weird fact that might make all of us uncomfortable, depending on how you define incest, it actually is legal in the U.S. in a lot of places.
Oh, yeah, in a lot of places it is.
Like, if you consider incest exclusively being marriage, then that's different. If you consider it being sexual activity, there are many states in the United States that have a general policy of no, it's not okay, and then have explicit exceptions that almost exactly word for word go to what you said at the beginning, Andrew.
Right. By the way, incest is biblical too.
It is. Oh my God, is it biblical?
It's super biblical.
Yeah, righteous Lot and his daughters. Yeah. Jesus loved and praised righteous Lot for having sex with his daughters. So.
Right, exactly. I mean, there's lots of that. Anyway, Andrew, we have a long answer, so we'd love to hear your response.
Wow. Yeah. No, it doesn't mean I agree. It doesn't mean therefore if you deduct one religion that atheism has all the answers. You're saying it's the best system for morality. You got to go outside of science. So I guess that's a different question: morality, or is there any God of any kind? But I don't know if you can adopt the harm principle. If it allows incest in any case at all, like. They're not causing harm.
If nobody's being harmed.
Let's make an example here. You have two cousins who are both sterile, first cousins. Fuck it. First cousins who are both sterile, who want to have a relationship with each other, don't intend on having kids, do whatever.
And there's no like one of them's 25 and one of them's 10. They're both like
both
70.
the same age.
Yeah.
Both the same age. Both in similar economic positions, So like, we're minimizing potentials for exploitation. Exactly. Is that really a bad thing in and of itself? I get it's weird. I get it's uncomfortable, right? For a lot of us, because obviously we don't have those kinds of desires, but there are people that do, and they obviously live their lives. I mean, can we not let them live their lives?
Yeah. And besides, like, what the problem oftentimes when it comes to these other things that we say, like, man, we just really don't like murder, that's not good. Nobody should do that, right? It's because it explicitly harms people, right? Nobody's running around making campaigns about, like, I don't know, taking a pen and like flipping it in the air a couple of times and doing that to keep yourself entertained, because it doesn't cause harm. If it does cause harm, though, of course you're going to see all these people out there fighting against it. But if we've already taken that off the table, if it were possible, okay, and it's obviously crazy, but if it were possible that you could commit murder without harming anybody, we wouldn't be against that, because again, the harm is what is important, the overall well-being. Now, you could make the argument living in a world where we perpetuate certain ideas leads to more harm. And I do think that's a legitimate argument. And maybe that's the case here, right? With certain specific things. But again, if you've taken out all harm whatsoever, it kind of seems like, it's not moral or immoral, it's amoral.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't apply.
Yeah.
Yeah. The universe obviously is amoral, so.
Sure.
Seems to be, yeah.
If I believe in a higher power, I still believe in a higher power, but I just have to come to terms with the fact that it's amoral, because there doesn't seem to be a deity that cares about us. But so why is harm? So what is your evidence that harm is a bad thing? It's just.
I have when we say bad, that is purely a human construct. That's not an objective.
We can all be genocidal. Right, we can all be genocidal, and
we could, but we don't. Why don't we?
Yeah.
Why don't we, Andrew? Because a lot of us, even internally, just recognize that that's not a thing we want to do.
Right. And that's oftentimes how I approach this, Andrew. When somebody says to me, well, hey, SR, you seem to be saying well-being is the thing we should all go for with this morality stuff. My response is, oh, no, I'm not saying that. You are. When you tell me your moral system, I see well-being as a massive part of it. And my response is, if well-being is a part of your moral system, just be consistent. Just use it across the board.
Here's a cold, hard truth of the universe, Andrew, is one, you may have already alluded to it. It may be the case that there isn't a God that cares about us. But two, what's even more damning than that is that even if there was a God, we still have to make our own decisions on how we should treat other people. And that is a hard thing. When you deconstruct from Christianity, It was one of the first things I was trying to grip onto. What do we do about this whole morality thing? Because I thought this book or this culture, this religion was the source of my principles, and ultimately that being from God, which makes them objective, which makes them ultimate, which makes them universal. I don't have that anymore. Instead, every single part of my moral philosophy and systems have come from me deciding at the end of the day whether I think it's right or wrong. And that's scary because people are like, oh, you can decide to do bad things. And yes, people do decide to do bad things. And it happens. And I can't stop that just because God, I think God is real. I can't lie and say, well, there is a God and actually he doesn't want you to do it. And that's why you shouldn't do it. That, in that and of itself is violating another principle, which I deem to be important, which is I believe that people should believe in true things, and I want to uphold that. And by refusing to violate that, I have to say, I can't let God be the reason why you don't want to do something or do something, at least not in my mind. I don't think it's a good justification. And I'm not going to pretend like it is just because it's inconvenient for humanity to believe otherwise. Right.
Yeah, we have to be more practical than dogmatic.
Absolutely.
Of course.
Absolutely. We're playing this hard, fast, and loose, baby. That's the human way. That's the only way we can actually do things is just to meet people where we're at. And so even though I don't make any money doing this, Ellie doesn't make any money doing this, we still volunteer our time doing this every week because we get something out of it. And we think we're doing something for people, even though we're not going to get a reward at the end of our lives for this. But we do it because we can and we want to, and we think it's good. It's helping more than it's harming. And that's enough for me. And that's going to be enough for most people.
And if I may, Andrew, I will tell you one of my absolute favorite discussions that I have ever listened to on this topic of morality, and it is with Shannon Q, Scott Clifton, and Matt Dillahunty. They hash it out for like maybe 2 hours, and I just genuinely believe that was such a wonderful conversation. And I think it may spark a little bit excitement in you to like go look further and see more people talking about this, because it is dense, man. Like morality is a lot. There's so much to it, and we're not gonna be able to all figure it out the first week after we deconstruct. It's taken me years, man. Years.
I find that most Christians are interested in meta ethics and not particularly ethics themselves. What I mean by this is they're not interested necessarily in studying detailed systems. They're not looking at John Rawls or again, like utilitarian or Kantian ethics and consequentialist ethics. And they're not looking at these systems. They're interested in saying, well, why should I pick one system over another? That seems to be the more pressing question. And that's the one that's harder to answer because there is no God at the end of the day telling you to do something one or the other.
And maybe it just doesn't have an answer, right?
And it probably doesn't.
Like, what a bummer. In my mind. And we have to we have to come up with the answer ourselves. Like, it's a lot of work, man. It's a lot more work than just God coming up and saying, I don't like whatever. Right? So,
but it's more honest. It's more honest than pretending like it's something it's not. Anyway, go ahead, Andrew.
None of us have it all figured out. I agree. Not even religions. So I have a trick question. And if we have time for this last,
real quick, and we'll let you go. Go ahead.
Okay, so you guys believe our species basically is the most important species, but you believe it without evidence.
No.
Yeah, I don't believe
it. Buddy, I'm vegan. I don't think we're the most important species.
You picked the wrong dude to say that to. Yeah, man. Let Dan name the traits with you, brother. You're gonna rethink that comment quick, man.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Oh boy. All right. Okay. So, but we believe harm is bad without evidence. Is that a fair?
See, I don't think so.
We believe harm is bad without evidence. Well, let's parse this question. Harm is undesirable, and that's why I don't want it. It has nothing to do with evidence. The reason why I want I would think certain practices I would tell other people not to do because there's evidence that it causes harm and harm is undesirable, but it ultimately comes down to human desire. It's less of an evidence-based question and more of a, do I want this or not?
Yeah, I think that's fair. The definition of harm is one that has a negative connotation specifically, to help us say, that's one of those things we don't like. I mean, but yeah, I think there's good evidence to show that if you take a person and against their will make them touch a hot stove, they're not very happy with you and they don't want to be your friend, right?
Yeah.
And that makes you sad. And
but
other
can
people
we say
don't,
that's objective or wrong or right? No. We just respect other people's wants. That's pretty much it.
Right. Once we choose the goal, the subjective goal of well-being, harm, benefit, pain, pleasure, that stuff, then it's like we can have objective measures to getting further or closer to it. But yeah, like we could do anything else, right? I always think of it like blueprints, like we could build a house, right? But we don't have to. We could also build like a well or a car or anything else. But it seems to be the case. Most people that engage with this seem to want to build a house. And if we're trying to build a house, this is how we do it.
Yeah. Yep. That answers your question, Andrew.
So that was the trap. You guys believe things without evidence. But so do I. So
I don't, man, I really don't think we said that at all. I think
probably not, but that's okay.
No, obviously.
Listen back to the call.
Yeah, I would replay what we just said and really think about what we said because I really don't think we said that, Andrew. And to be honest, I think that's a little disingenuous. But yeah, do I believe things without evidence? Well, if we're talking about in the strictest of scientific terms, yeah, absolutely. I have anecdotal experiences that inform my worldview. Yeah, that may not be the most specific of science. But anecdote in itself is evidence in a form. It may not be good evidence, but it is evidence. Right. And I have evidence that I don't like certain things because I've been in situations before and I've responded, I don't like that thing. So I choose not to do something because I don't like that thing. And I have evidence that I don't like that thing. So yeah, I guess there is evidence in a belief if you want to like route it that way. But, it's just, I don't know. What do you think, Elliot?
I think Andrew, if you are really interested in doing this type of conversation, swimming in these waters, going into the deeper end, brother, my suggestion, honestly, just sit down for the next few weeks and just try to consume as much as you can from various individuals talking about their views on morality, talking about why they pick this system over that system. I mean, again, it's years, man. Years of me just wasting so much of my time on the weekends, losing friends because I'm just sitting there trying to talk to them about, Nathaniel Mill and all that shit.
I know. Yeah.
They don't want to do that on a Tuesday at 3 a.m.
It's true. At the end of the day, I have values and I can't escape the fact that I have values.
Right.
And so my values are going to lead me, if I think through them critically, through the systems that I adopt, like having a vegan sense of ethics or, being broadly consequentialist, myself, right? Like that's only strictly because I have values. And the fact is, if my values were wired differently, yeah, my ethics will be different. Like that's, it's not based, it's not a similar kind of thing. You can't get an is from an ought, right?
Yeah. But with my current set of values, I'd like to be as consistent as possible with them.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
And so maybe I'm not. I think absolutely we've all got, places in our systems where we're not doing it perfectly. But again, like Dan said, I do have these values. I do have this value of I want other people to flourish. I want other people to have autonomy. And so that's why just, for instance, I think access to abortion is a totally good thing. I think that absolutely reduces harm in the world. And so, maybe that's inconsistent based on my values, But then I would just need some demonstration in between, because that's where the objectivity comes in, Andrew.
Yeah.
My value is subjective, but how we get to that is not.
A lot of moral problems come down to a difference in value. So like autonomy is something that we value, but if we also value egalitarian sense of health, at least a lot of us do. But if I was a doctor and I knew there was a person who needed an organ sitting in the waiting room, and the only way I could get that organ is to take an organ from somebody else unconsensually, there's something that violates that, right? Because we're violating autonomy, even though we're helping somebody else out. So like, that's where a lot of moral conflicts come to, is which is the higher value in that hierarchy, right? Everybody getting treatment and being well versus, people's sense of autonomy, for example. And there's tons of issues like this that come up that may not have like real answers.
And what's coming to mind right now,
definitive, but yeah.
And I may be wrong, but I think it was Derek Parfit who talks about like particularism,
yes,
which is this, concept of like how, the specifics of the situation really do matter when it comes to which of these values, wins out and so forth. And yeah, man, again, Andrew, not trying to give you just a shit ton of homework, bro. But seriously, like there is a lot of really good discussion out there on this. And do not feel like, oh man, I've already spent weeks looking at this shit. I know it all, or I should know it all, or no. Literally, we have been having this conversation as people for thousands of years.
It's true, and there's a lot of people smarter than us to talk about. By the way, I'm thinking about. I don't think Parfit said that. I think Parfit's more about population ethics. I don't know if he coined particularism. I could be wrong, but
Derek Parfit has some really good shit too, though.
Parfit is okay. Not to go too side on tangent, but Parfit, if you think you know moral philosophy, you have until you read Parfit, because Derek Parfit is asking like weird ass population ethics questions that's just like, all right, I don't know how to answer any of this. This is just now we're getting math involved, and there's a reason why I like the humanities.
RM Hare. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I wouldn't have picked that one out. Yeah. Okay.
I'm not even trying.
Richard Mervyn Hare. Mervyn Hare. Yeah.
Anyway,